Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is a Ukraine War Frontline update for the 11th of April 2023. Let's get straight to the northeast sector, the axis from Kupiansk to Svatva to Kreminna in the northeast. Not really a lot of news on that front. Let's go to Vuhledar's map. You can see Kupiansk here, just north of there. There's a interesting mapping that they have still, which I have not seen reflected elsewhere, but this is the idea that Liman Pershi there is still contested, that the Russians will push back a little bit just south of Avdivka, but again, I don't have that reflected on my map. My map looks like this, so it's pretty much a straight line across there. Sinkivka not under Russian control. In fact, I changed Liman Pershi to be under Russian control again, but that may be inaccurate. Anyway, there's actually not really been any activity there. So as we come further down on the Vuhledar's map, down past Svatva, no activity along the front line until we get to south of Svatva towards Ploshchanka, as you can see there. And going towards kind of Makivka area and whatnot. And then further down south, we have, so there's Makivka. Further down south, we have this area that the Ukrainians have gained just here, and area that the Russians have lost, but there are pushes on both sides there. Anyway, the ISW says not a lot going on. Usual kind of repelled attacks Yampilivka, Torska, Nevska, Makivka, Chervonopepivka, Kuzmyrna in the forest, Dubrova in the forest, Bilhorivka just south of the forest, and Nokomayansky south of the forest as well. So all the usual places, as I say. Just interesting that the types of troops you see or being reported on in the area: Chechen Special Forces, the Akhmat Brigade, LNR Army Corps, just a regular army of the militia, really. Bars 14, so those are combat reserves, and the VDV, special kind of crack units, or at least that's what they're supposed to be. I don't know, given the amount of reconstitutions they've had, whether they are still as crack and elite as they were. So the paratroopers, Russian airborne force there. So just lots of different Russian forces operating in the Kreminna area, but not really a lot of information on what has happened. So no real moves there. I will just show you Vuhledar's map before going to mine. As we come down the front line to the Kreminna area, claims of activity in the Dubrova, Kuzmyrna area. So there's a small settlement there, Kuzmyrna. Activity in the forest, Bilhorivka, just to the south of the forest, and then we come on to Bakhmut. So no real news until we get to Bakhmut, and there's been claims of activity back up in this area. There's a very tiny settlement, Sako I Vantseti there. There are claims. So if we go to the general view from War Mapper is there have been no confirmed changes to control since the last update. Syriac Maps has no control changes in Bakhmut, so a really stable day for Bakhmut yesterday. Vuhledar doesn't report anything up in the Sako I Vantseti, but I'm going to show you a little bit of activity there. And then as we come down south, you can see, the city itself, Bakhmut itself, there's obviously all sorts of pressure around it. That's not, there's no different news there, I guess. No reports. Pro-Ukrainian mapper says yesterday I received reports that Russian troops reactivated their push around Sako I Vantseti to Vasyukivka. This could be a result of Russian forces failing to breach Orikovo-Vasilivka, now trying to go around to push along the Vasyukivka River. No map changes are reported yet. I'm going to go to ISW because I find this quite interesting. ISW reports on their Bakhmut section, Russian forces continue to make territorial gains in and around Bakhmut on April the 9th and 10th, but likely continue to suffer significant casualties. Okay, pretty generic. Geolocated footage posted on 9th and 10th shows that Russian forces made marginal advances northwest of Kromova in southwest Bakhmut and north of Sako I Vantseti, north of Bakhmut. So the claim is geolocated footage, and there's all sorts of, to that footnote, here are all the claims. Well, I've kind of parsed that down to these four particularly. I mean, lots of them are repeated. And we're just going to have a look at the geolocations of what's going on to see. And I don't actually think that any of these represents advances for the Russians. So Ukrainian signaling unit with the help of 93rd Mechanized Brigade targeting Wagner mercenaries. So Wagner mercenaries getting hit there. And that is in this geolocated position. And we will just see where that is. And that's in the center behind Russian lines. So that is nothing particularly exciting, as in that certainly doesn't show any Russian gains. That's well within the area that I have mapped under Russian control. So the Russians are there, yes, and they're getting hit. So not a good look for the Russians there. So here we have let's go and translate what that says. That says artillery of the Rapid Response Brigade of the NSU Rubizh worked on the location of the personnel and equipment of the Russians. That's what that says. So that's artillery operating there, and that has been geolocated to this point. See if this shows any gains at all. And you can guess what I'm going to say is that no, it doesn't. It's actually well behind the lines in Kupiansk-Kreminna, and the Russians are just being hit there. Again, that doesn't signify gains. Okay, let's go to the third one. See, here's a fight within the trench network where we have a couple of Russian soldiers there attacking, coming down a trench, attacking the trenches of the Ukrainians here. And actually, one of those dies, and then it's kind of video cuts out. They throw grenades at each other, but you've got Ukrainians in the trench here, Ukrainians in the trench over here. So these guys were never really going to succeed too easily with that. Anyway, where's that taking place? So does this signify any Russian marginal Russian advances? And this is taking place as we come out and come down to there. Okay, so that is trench lines here. You don't see it on this. This is 2018 Google mapping. So the most recent Google maps would show trenches there. Now these are Russians advancing down a trench line to Ukrainian trenches and not succeeding. So I don't think that shows advances. This is grey zone. Those trenches are in control of the Ukrainians, and they repel literally just two soldiers there. So I don't think that signifies a gain for the Russians. Right, the last one is this, and this is a bit of video footage that has done the rounds. So what is it? Let's have a look. Yeah, brilliant, thanks. So we have a bridge under which Russians are hiding. I think there are also some foxholes to the side of the bridge as well, possibly around here. It gets absolutely hammered with what looks like airbursts, and then another significant artillery bombardment. Then there's an IFV or APC, can't quite see, dropping off Ukrainian troops. Ukrainian troops, I'm sure they are Ukrainian because they've got green armbands on. And they are then dropping grenades down foxholes to the side. As you can see there, and then throwing grenades. So you can see that's a grenade being thrown in, and then a drone drops something. A drone drops grenade for them to use. I couldn't work that out earlier. I was like, why is a Ukrainian drone dropping an IED on a Ukrainian troop? Actually, they are using that to give them ammunition. That's fascinating. And anyway, that bridge gets kind of taken out, and there were a few Ukrainian Russians who aren't long for the world there in that area, and one actually gets captured and then brought back. So that is, so does that constitute a Russian advance? Well, we'll see. Let's look at the geolocation for that, which is this one. Okay, let's geolocate this on my map, and that is okay. So that is in Sacco Ivancetti. So my question is null reports using the ISW to suggest that they have reactivated their push around Sacco Ivancetti? Because really all this is some Russians hiding under a broken bridge, and the Ukrainians going into that area both on foot and with artillery first, and with drone activity, which, in my opinion, would suggest that the Ukrainians are active here. But if an IFV is dropping them off and they're clearing out Russians here, then actually that, to me, suggests that the Ukrainians have advanced, not that the Russians advanced, because the Russians have had that under their control, supposedly, for the last month or however long that I've had that there. So every single one of those geolocated bits of evidence that are footnoted in the ISW, every single one, because some of those are just repeated just in different sources, every single one, in my opinion, shows, well, none of them show Russian marginal advance. So that is incorrect. Is not Russian forces have made marginal advances unless you're operating off mapping from like at least a week ago, and that would only be in that south eastern area of Bakhmut, on the one that was down here, which was Russian troops getting hit there. Now, possibly that could show marginal advances if your mapping was a week old. But other than that, every single one of those, I would suggest, shows that the Russians are getting hammered and perhaps losing, at least not gaining ground. And up north there, I think that's then possibly losing control over an area of Saku Vansetti just there. Anyway, that's just some interesting, there's footage and interesting geolocation. And I like doing stuff like that. It shows you where things are happening, but no real movement in terms of Bakhmut, within Bakhmut, and either north and south of Bakhmut, as far as I can tell. I would say that isn't necessarily accurate, especially, well, unless that footage that's just I've shown you, the geolocation, is not what they're talking about and actually something else is going on there. Now, as far as in Bakhmut itself, no reports, again, Ukrainian source says Bakhmut in the south, there isn't any Russian advance noted in the last 24 hours. There seems to be quite a big contested area still. In the north, near the Omega Mini Hotel, there are unconfirmed claims of Ukrainian positions taken by the Russian. Fights east of Bakhmut railway station continue. So this is to say that possibly the Russians have taken ground in this area up here, the Omega Mini Hotel. Now, I've already got that. I don't know whether that was kind of based on 48 hours ago, because I have all this area under the Russian control anyway. So it could just be confirmation of that gain from 24 to 48 hours ago. So arguably no change in Bakhmut. You can see, just in case you are new to my videos, the blue area is controlled by the Ukrainians. I need to change that there. Red is under control of the Russians, as according to pro-Russian mapper Syriac maps, and the yellow is under control of the Russians, as according to a pro-Ukrainian map. So there is some disparity between the pro-Russian and the pro-Ukrainian sources, both in the north, in the east, and in the southeast particularly. And then it kind of, there are differences as you come south of Bakhmut as well, along the canal. But there have been no changes from both of those mappers in the Bakhmut area, no changes at all. So I would assume that Bakhmut has been stable over the last 24 hours. Let's go back to ISW to just see what they say about Bakhmut as well as that. Ukrainian Ground Force Commander Colonel Sursky stated on April the 10th, so this is yesterday, that Ukrainian forces have exhausted Wagner forces so much that the Russian military command has had to send Spetsnaz, so that's the special forces, and VDV, that's their paratroops, their airborne elements, to Bakhmut. So those are your crack groups have been sent to Bakhmut. Why would they do that? Well, according to the Ukrainian command, is because the Wagner have just been exhausted. They have culminated, and that's what the claim I've been making, and the ISW, for the last week or so, last week and a half. That although they continue to make incremental gains in Bakhmut, and that probably will continue, that is mainly as a result of the help that the Wagner are being given by the conventional forces. And it seems that Wagner are struggling to recruit and struggling to replenish their exhausted forces with their own staffing. Anyway, let's move south of Bakhmut as we come out to pop down past Toretsk and Shumi and New York to arrive at Avdivka, which is like Bakhmut 2.0, except that has very much stabilized over the last couple of weeks after the Russians did make some pretty quick gains there. Now, Vuhledar has some activity just in the canal area. The Russians pushing to the west, just south of Bakhmut, near Kherson, or north of Kherson, west of Klishchivka. And then as we come down to Avdivka, we have, let's have a little look. Actually, I don't know that they have mapped Avdivka today. Of course they have. So here's Avdivka pushing to the north by Nova Bakhmutivka, Krasnohorivka. They don't have this area here, Poulet-Volon being sort of filled in by the Russian IDU and Syriac Maps does. So we pop along to Syriac Maps. They don't report anything on Bakhmut today, but they do say, in the last 24 hours, they do say on the Avdivka front, the Russian army have expanded the buffer zone around Nova Bakhmutivka up to the H20 highway. Meanwhile, from the south, troops advance north of Vodyane and are less than a kilometer from Suverny. In addition, clashes with the Ukrainian army are taking place in the remaining trench systems, which confirms that any report of the Russians reaching Lastochkerne town is false. Basically, there are claims that the Russians have done better than they had. It's what we heard around Stepova as well, which is here. But the Russians have made some gains over in this direction there. So what does that mean? Well, on my map, that looks like this area being filled in there. And I talked about that yesterday. It's just confirming what I'd changed yesterday. That has also changed on Deep State map, but obviously not Poulet-Volon. I've just done this the same for part of the Avdivka map here. I might, if I have time, do it all around. Obviously, this kind of thing is quite time consuming, but I do find it quite useful to show you what the differences are between pro-Ukrainian, yellow, and pro-Russian, red mapping. The claim from Syriac Maps is that the Russians have made this gain that's not reflected in Deep State's map, and that they are very close again to Suverny, not for the first time. This kind of goes backward and forward. There are lots of trench systems around this whole area, and the Russians and Ukrainians kind of, it's a bit like yo-yo around there, as they take trenches and then lose trenches. And as for the Avdivka map, here it is. No confirmed changes according to War Mapper, so it doesn't have any changes around the Suverny area as Syriac Maps does. Okay, let's pop and have a look at what ISW say. So the ISW says, repelled attacks to all the areas to the north, Novokolynove, Berdichi, Suverny to the south, Pervomaysky to the south, Vodyane to the south, and indeed Marinka. Repelled attacks, not much activity, and then we'll go on to talk about that in a second. Russians do make claims of marginal gains. A Ukrainian official indicated that the tempo of Russian offensive operations in the Donetsk direction is slowing and that Russian forces are engaging in defensive preparations. Ukrainian Joint Press Center of the Tavrisk direction, Dmitry Trashkivsky, stated on April 9th, 2 days ago, that the tempo of Russian ground attacks has decreased in this sector of the front, and that Russian forces are now shelling at a rate 1/3 less than that of February 2023. So 1/3 less. If I understand that, that's at a 66% rate of what they were. It's not 1/3 of, but 1/3 less. So what they were shelling a month and a half ago, they're now a third less. Russian forces have concentrated 205 battalion tactical groups in this area out of fear of a Ukrainian counteroffensive. I reported that yesterday, but those battalion tactical groups are apparently operating at maybe 300 personnel in the group, so that they're very much undermanned compared to what they were. And other than that, just single word mention of Marinka, not much to say in terms of activity there. Poulet-Volon's map of Marinka indicates that, there's still pressure on there, but no real change in the center or even just to the north. Now, I've had a couple of mappers saying there's been some Russian gains there over the last week, but that's not reflected in Poulet-Volon's map. And then going to the west towards Zaporizhia, we've got Velika Novosilka, sorry, and there was apparently, if we go to ISW here, a ground attack near Novosilka that was unsuccessful. Ukrainian forces conducted a ground attack there, so Ukrainians, that's according to a Russian military blogger. So if we come out of my map, down past Marinka, no real information about that. No information about Vuhledar. And then we see that around this area there was a repelled ground attack by the Ukrainians. But other than that, not too much to report in the Zaporizhia direction. We dip back into the ISW, the American military think tank. They say of the kind of Zaporizhia area, Russian forces conducted artillery and missile strikes throughout southern Ukraine on April 9th and 10th. Ukrainian General Staff reported on the 10th. Yesterday, Russian forces launched 2 S-300 missiles at civilian objects in Zaporizhia. S-300s are, their weapon of choice for a lot of these places. Kramatorsk, Konstantinivka to the west of Bakhmut, and Zaporizhia, often hit with S-300s. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command stated on the 9th that 6 Russian Su-35s attacked the Berislav area of Kherson Oblast with guided aerial bombs and Kh-31 anti-radar missiles on the night of April the 8th to 9th. So just to let you know where that is, if we come over to the Dnipro River, just to the west here, to use my cursor, my mouse has stopped working, we have Berislav, which is the other side of the dam. That's the Novokakhovka Dam. So there we have, Berislav there. This area seems to be intensely hit by these guided bombs, these kits that have been added to the FAB bombs, that the dumb munitions that the Russians have. It seems a number of. They are proving to be quite a challenge for the Ukrainians at the moment. Russian forces continued routine shelling along Kherson, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts on the 9th and 10th. A Russian mill blogger posted footage reportedly showing Russian forces using a thermobaric artillery system, a TOS-1A, to strike Ukrainian positions near Ochakiv. So Ochakiv is in the Mykolaiv Oblast. So that is an interesting use of that. Let's go to my map here. This is opposite the Kimburn Peninsula. So we come here. There you go. There's Ochakiv. And that is being hit by a thermobaric piece of artillery. So that you would imagine is on the spit somewhere. You'd think that the Ukrainians would be trying to do some counter battery work on that piece of equipment. Another mill blogger noted that artillery units are striking Ukrainian positions in Orikhiv, and that's back over here. We've had talk of that being the site of some HIMARS, and HIMARS being blown up in a hangar there, as according to Rebar. And speaking of Rebar, I did forget to bring the pro-Russian source in here. What else they add to the whole, the activity going on the whole front line? Up around the Chervonopivka area, they're saying that they are advancing to the west. The Russians taking some Ukrainian strongholds. Massive artillery strikes being launched against positions in Chaziv Yar. There have been, indeed, I would agree that there's a lot of heavy artillery hitting those places behind Bakhmut. Russian forces are active in the center, fighting near the railway station, and when it talks about Marinka, saying that they are fighting along the front line along Druzhba Avenue, that is still seems to be the front line, and that there were Russian successes in the industrial zone that's been taken under control, which I indicated yesterday anyway. So that's just to remind you of Marinka. There was this area to the south where they're taking extra territory. They've taken, as according to Syria maps, the whole of the industrial zone there to the south. That's Druzhba Avenue, going in the northeasterly direction there, and there's fighting all along the front there still. So anyway, that's what Rebar has to say about the front line. Nothing too different to what I've already said. Anyway, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all the support you're giving to the channel. Thank you so much to the new members and existing members who have come to support the channel. Really, really grateful. And thank you so much for the fantastic thread conversations below all of my videos. So appreciated. Anyway, take care, and I will speak to you in a third video today, I promise.